Tom Macdonald is one of the most interesting weirdos to ever step into the rap game. Endlessly controversial, extremely polarizing, and undoubtedly corny. Now before you turn this video off because you think it's just going to be a teardown of Tom Macdonald from a very angry, liberal, soy boy, well, let me tell you, that's not what this is going to be. I'm Canadian just like Tom Macdonald, and I also live in the Maritimes, which is where his prime fan base mostly comes from, so I know quite a bit about him. I'm pretty caught up on the lore, and overall, I don't take him too seriously, so I'm not just going to tear him down and call him a goofball and evil and blah blah blah.
You guys are just a bunch of triggered SJWs.
I'm just very drawn to this strange man's antics in the same way that I'm drawn to somebody like Joker 305, who's actually the exact same age as Tom, so that really shows you a life choice right there. So of course I have to look into the story of Tom Macdonald and just really hope that none of his country bumpkin fans get me whacked out here, because it could really happen. I'm really in these streets, you gotta understand. So anyways, let's get into it. The story of Tom Macdonald. Important figures that you need to cover: Nova Rockefeller and of course Tom himself, and these two come together to create the character known as Tom Macdonald. First we'll look at Tom. He was born September 21st, 1988 in Mission, British Columbia, Canada, a little city right out of Vancouver, a city that's mostly well known for its decriminalization of all drugs. He's the oldest in the family with one younger sister, and his parents, unlike most rappers, are happily married, and his upbringing was pretty trouble-free. So overall his life sounds pretty picturesque, but that's not always a good thing, because there's really only two things you can do in a small Canadian town like this: work your life away or drink until your liver fails, which we will talk about, but for now we have to talk about Tom's introduction to rap. So basically him and his dad went to a pawn shop, his dad gave him $5, told him pick out anything you want, and he decided to pick a Tupac CD for his album All Eyes on Me. He took it home, popped it in the boombox, and after listening to it he really attached on to what Tupac was saying. After all, he was kind of a corny, not that cool white kid living in Canada, and Tupac on the other hand is basically the epitome of charisma, so he really wanted to be like him, but unfortunately he couldn't relate that much to the lyrics because they had nothing to do with his life. So for now, rap just kind of stayed in Tom's back pocket as something that he might try to pursue in the future, but not something that he really thought he could actually do. By the time that Tom was 13, his family would pack up their entire lives and move to Edmonton, Alberta, which despite what Michael McCrudden says is not some dead ice pile in the middle of hell, it's actually the Texas of Canada. Being a highly conservative province and an overall pretty liberal country, that's where he would get a lot of his beliefs, or at least that's what you would think. But you would be completely wrong, because Tom is what we like to call a professional contrarian. He has no real beliefs and really only likes to go against what he sees as the establishment. So at the time, just like any pot-smoking Canadian dirtball teen, he was anti-cop, anti-gun, and anti-religion. Someone that you would call a true liberal cuck. But as he got older, he eventually took an interest in wrestling, even doing it professionally for a time, having to put his schooling on the back burner so he could focus all his energy on training. And this is a very important part of Tom's story, because he would learn one important skill: how to put on a show. Because you see, in wrestling, there's often faces and heels. Heels are the people you're not supposed to like, the villains. The person who talks the most shit, the person that riles up the crowds, the person that everybody loves to hate overall. Sometimes they even become more beloved than the people they're supposed to root for, because after all, everybody likes a good villain. And that's exactly the role that Tom would play, and because of what he learned while he was a wrestler, he would later be able to implement those same skills into his rap career and persona. But that wasn't the only important event that took place in Tom's life, because soon after that, he got introduced to his all-time hero, an absolute legend in the rap game, Eminem, after his friend ended up stealing the Slim Shady LP from his older brother's room and giving it to Tom to borrow. And after listening to the first song, Tom fell completely in love, seeing himself in Eminem more than any other rapper he had ever known. Because you see, there's an effect with weird Canadian kids who have very sheltered lives, not a whole lot of real problems, and hate the world because they think the world is against them, really attaching themselves onto Eminem. And that's most likely because Eminem often goes after his mom, and a lot of these people also blame just one specific person for ruining their lives, but I guess I'm projecting a little bit here, so let's move on. After this, Tom would focus his energy back on writing raps and poems, and then he continued to wrestle pretty successfully for about 5 years before finally realizing his body couldn't take it anymore and the money just wasn't enough to justify it. So he put the spandex down once and for all and went back into the real world, picking up carpentry as a trade, which overall is a pretty respectable job, but I can't blame him for getting bored of that after a while, because I don't think 60 years of that would be that entertaining, but maybe you can tell me if it is in the comments. And with work that's as mind-numbing as that, it's not long before you pick up the bottle and start drinking all your problems away, because you really have nothing else to do in a little town like that, and that's exactly what Tom did. But luckily that wasn't the only thing Tom did, because he also made a positive change in his life when he would start recording rock music, writing down lyrics, trying to work on his vocal patterns, learning how to play guitar. But after a while he realized that his voice just wasn't cut out to make that type of music, as well as the whole genre of rock as a whole becoming less and less relevant as the decade went on, while rap was continuing to grow in popularity. So he got to work setting up his own home studio and recording a couple rap songs. He also really wanted to perform them live, so he got to work looking at venues all across Alberta that would take him on, and he discovered one that was pretty local. He ended up calling them on the phone, showing them a little bit of his music, and overall they liked it and told him that he could actually perform. But there was one caveat: he had to hand out flyers all across the city to try to drum up hype for the show. So he ended up going to the venue a little bit early, and this is where he met Nova Rockefeller, a once popular indie singer who was signed to Def Jam Records and even dated Ari the Rugged Man. But she ended up becoming disenfranchised with the entire music industry, leading her to do anything she could to get dropped by her label, which they eventually agreed to a couple years later. After her and Tom met, they immediately hit it off, and even though they didn't start dating for a couple years after this, they became fast friends. And she would become very important to his story because she's actually the one who shoots all his music videos. She has some pretty good videographer skills that you just have to respect, and it seems like all of her time in the industry wasn't completely wasted because she learned quite a bit about marketing. But either way, the show went off without a hitch. Tom ended up performing his song House in the Hills, and I even think he took footage from this very same performance and spliced it into his music video for the same song. After that, he went back to BC to shoot music videos for his first time official project, Son of Leanne, which is named after his mom. But after a while, he realized he couldn't make it in the Canadian scene and decided to move to LA to try to break through into the industry. He really had two choices: go to Toronto or go to LA, and he decided to pick LA. He took all the money he had in the world, moved over there, and started making music, but unfortunately it didn't go as well as he had hoped, because he ended up falling into the club life, drinking too much, taking a bunch of Xanax, which all led up to him suffering a drug overdose in his hotel room, which eventually led to a full-on mental breakdown, which led to his parents hiring one of his friends to break into his house, kidnap him, and send him back to BC so he could be back with his family. And after he arrived, he ended up sitting on his mom's couch for the next 9 months, not talking, not speaking, not interacting, barely being able to eat, and not being able to sleep whatsoever. And that's basically how he lived his life for 9 months in full-on psychosis. He even thought about ending it all, but he was able to get medication, meditate, and get himself back into a healthy mindset. Now, a lot of people say that he was suffering from extreme anxiety around this time, but I don't know, that doesn't really sound like anxiety. It seems pretty extreme for that. I think he might actually be suffering with a little bit of PTSD after his drug overdose, on top of the fact that he was probably taking too many psychedelics that ended up giving him a psychotic break shortly after that, and then he wasn't able to recover because he was basically unattached to his body. But hey, I'm not a drug specialist, I'm just speculating here, I could be completely wrong. Either way though, eventually he was able to get himself back on his feet, move out of his parents' house, and go back to LA to give it one more shot at becoming a big time rapper. And even though his parents were extremely nervous to see him go again after everything that had happened, they gave him some wise words of encouragement and sent him off.
I don't know if I ever told you this yet, but
You are loved.
you grew far past my expectations. And you should be proud of yourself for just being you.
And with those words of encouragement ringing in his head, he knew this time he could really make it. He was really going to become a big time artist. And he wouldn't be alone either, because he ended up moving in with his longtime friend, Nova Rockefeller. And before long, the two ended up dating. But things weren't all well, because before long, they started running dry on money. It seems like the type of music that Tom was making just wasn't hitting in the industry, and he didn't know what to do. So he took his one cigarette that he had left, sat out on the porch, and smoked it. And during that period of time that he was smoking that half of a cigarette, he had a very genius idea, a marketing scheme that couldn't fail. He was going to grift. Now at this point, Tom knew that he couldn't make it as a mainstream artist. He was too old. The type of music that he was making just didn't fit with the mainstream mold at the time, and as hard as he tried, he just couldn't help but come off as corny to the younger listeners. So there was really only one plan of attack. As you see, this was 2017, and what happened in 2017? The SoundCloud wave officially hit its peak. In this post-Eminem revival world where lyrical rap had just become uncool and fallen out of favor, the mumble rappers were taking over everything. They were talking about cars, they were flexing money, they were talking about women, Xanax, drugs, they had colorful hair, they were mumbling and stumbling, and just overall, it was an epidemic, a disease that needed to be terminated. And with all the old heads hating on the wave, there was no better time for him to join in on it. Because you see, before this point, Tom made the same exact type of music, flexing, talking about girls.
I swear I'll do some fly shit none of my old friends will believe, like take my new friends on a cruise ship and pop bottles in Belize.
And then after he got off drugs and stopped drinking, he made Weepy Boy Sad music about how he used to be an alcoholic.
This a warning for the ones who say they aren't afraid. Lately I've been coming from a darker place.
but neither one of those types of music were hitting for him. So he created his song, Dear Rappers.
It's easy for these rappers who have it all. Talk about the days when they used to be sad.
A scathing diss track aimed at the entire SoundCloud wave, talking about how rappers were just selling cheap imitation stuff, trying to get people hooked on drugs and whiskey, and how everybody was fake in the industry.
Y'all can help me out though. I'm just trying to take care of my household. I don't even want to make my mouth go.
And keep in mind, this was before Kamikaze. Keep in mind, this was before Lucas Gone, Mac Lethal, and everybody else going at the mumble wave. Tom was actually an innovator in this field. So with the song recorded and Nova shooting the music video, Tom knew he had a hit on his hand, but there was one problem: he had to advertise it. So he began asking everybody that he knew for a little bit of money so he could run Facebook ads. He asked his mom for $300, asked his sister if he could have $300, and found some random Facebook investor who ended up giving him another $400. So with all that money combined, he ended up putting around $1,000 into a Facebook ad campaign. He dropped the video and then he crossed his fingers and hoped that it would blow up. And to everybody's shock and surprise, it actually worked. It ended up getting into everybody's Facebook feeds, and all the soccer moms and boomers absolutely loved what he was saying. It was about time that somebody took a stand against this piece of shit genre of music with all these mumble rappers who were corrupting the youth, and Tom was the white knight that we all needed. He had found his audience, and after that he knew what he had to do. He started working on his second hit, Hell of It.
Fans to feel you. Try to tell me I should calm it down. If you fight the system, they gon' try to kill you.
With the music video that looks like it was shot in the exact same place that Kid Buu did his visualizer for I Try, which surprisingly they're the same age as well, so once again, life choices.
I try so hard to find.
And this track had some killer bars about ODing like Lil Peep,
Could have a seizure like Wayne. I could just go OD like Peep.
really sticking it to the mumble rap wave.
Now, whoa, and I put them in the summer, hey, now.
But even with all the success, one problem persisted. People in Tom's comments just couldn't help but notice the fact he had dreadlocks. That just couldn't be right, because Tom is white and only black people have dreadlocks. So they kept commenting, calling him out, and Tom would not stand for that. So he dropped his hardest song to date, what most would consider his true blow-up moment, the track White Boy.
Boy, white boy, white boy, white boy.
And the Facebook moms absolutely loved this one. After all, it was a post-2016 world, Trump was elected, and flossing on the libs was very trendy. And those good old boys just couldn't help but respect him for saying the truth that nobody else had the balls to say. And just like that, a whole new grift fell into Tom's lap, the political grift. But could Tom do this? Could he go down that path? Because after all, it would lead to a lot of money and fame and everything he ever wanted. But at the same time, he would never be able to be a true, respected artist in the industry. He would never get label push, he'd never be able to get on Billboard, and he would never get gold plaques on his wall. And on top of that, he'd be seen as a corny, whack, white YouTube rapper who was only really popular with a very specific group of people. So for the time being, not knowing if he should go full on into his political grift, he decided to stay more in the middle, dropping his track American Dreams. This had a more centered take on American politics, talking about how schools should have their guns taken away.
I don't know none of the victims. I know the guns in the system promote the ones who are dangerous. You think it's tragic when a shooter student, but then say it's all a plan for them to change the constitution.
And even had a little bit of a diss aimed at Trump. It even had some bars about how the cops were actually people, and overall it just seemed like a misstep on the absolute path to greatness. What was Tom saying? Had he lost his mind? Had the left-wing liberal cucks completely belted his brain? Well, for the next little bit, Tom just didn't interject himself into the political world, deciding to drop some spoken word poems as well as dropping a couple more tracks talking about mumble rap and everything that came along with that. But with the mumble rap scene starting to fade away and that grift no longer getting him the views he once did, he had one more choice. Would he let his 15 minutes of fame pass him by, or would he double down and finally decide to become the political rapper we all need? But we all know what he needed to do, and he knew what he needed to do as well. He had this one chance. This was the role that he was meant to play, and he had no other choice. Life made him a villain. I mean, what would you do in that situation? Would you let all the fame fade away and just go back to being a footnote in rap history, doing carpentry work for the rest of your life, or would you fully embrace that villain role that was thrown upon you? Even if you don't fully believe in it, even if you know it's going to bring you a lot of problems and isolate you from a big part of your fan base, was it worth it to become famous? Well, for Tom it was, because he finally decided to take all of those lessons he learned as his time as a heel wrestler and finally became the villain we always needed, the conservative 6ix9ine. He dropped his track Politically Incorrect, his true, real pro-gamer move.
Privileged and whiter, they're black and the opposite. You get charged with harassment for hugging a woman or giving a compliment.
Which was then followed up by his song Everybody Hates Me, which was actually how I discovered him back in the day. And overall, this song actually isn't that political. It's kind of fun, and even though it's kind of goofy, it's not that bad of a song.
White people hate me, they say that I'm using my privilege for evil, I get it, hey.
And it even had a verse that was so hard within that he actually had to put suicide warning on his video because he was afraid his haters would just off themselves for daring to go against him.
Y'all gonna need some better dreams. I've been on the grind, looks like y'all been on your knees.
He also dropped an album around this time, but to be honest with you, in the main context of this overall story, his albums don't really matter that much. He only releases them on physical CD, and they're basically inflated merch for his really diehard supporters. He doesn't really say that much crazy shit on them, and he saves all of that for his music videos. But either way, his movement was in full effect. The conservative 6ix9ine was really taking over, and the gravy train was rolling. All the liberals and woke moralists, including that soy boy Anthony Fantano, were raging, and Tom was winning, baby. Timmy McDix was on his way to the top, and he immediately followed up Everybody Hates Me with his song Sad Rappers, a takedown on all the fake emo boys who were poisoning the youth's mind in the year of our Lord 2019.
Where'd all these subtle sad rappers come from? They showed up with those mumble rapper dum-dum.
And Tom even made a recovery here, showing love to Lil Peep, calling him a legend, up there with Cobain.
Talking Cobain, Lil Peep.
And I'm sorry, I just have to say it, this man is absolutely obsessed with Xanax. I mean, don't get me wrong, he's older, I understand, but the Xan wave basically fell off in 2017. This was 2019. Every single song, it's talking about Xanax.
I don't want your Xanax bars.
When he does interviews, he talks about Xanax.
I'm not brain dead from eating 13 Xanax a day, so.
The Xans are taking over everybody's mind.
You were a customer, you did Xanax.
He's absolutely fixated on the stuff, and I can only imagine it's because he listened to Eminem's Kamikaze album, and that's really his only interpretation of the entire mumble SoundCloud wave of rap, and he considers Lil Pump and Lil Xan the faces of that movement, so he probably doesn't know too much about it, but he really needs to let the Xanax go because it's 2024 and this man is still rapping about Xanax. Just change it to perks, buddy, you'll be okay.
Pop a perk like my back hurt.
But Tom was still fighting the good fight, and before long, more soldiers would join his cause in the fight against the evil mumble rap, including people like Lucas Gone and Mac Lethal. But things were not all well, because after Tom dropped the absolute banger Straight White Male, Mac would take to Facebook to sneak diss Tom, calling him a corny virtue signaling soy boy, before immediately backtracking after realizing that his fanbase had a lot of overlap with Tom's. He would immediately delete the tweet and then try to clarify, saying he wasn't talking about Tom, but it was too late. Tom had seen this. He finally got noticed. He finally got the attention he wanted, and there was no way he was going to pass up the chance to emulate his hero Eminem and do his own MGK versus Eminem diss track war. When he dropped his track Mac Lethal Sucks,
Who gave this old man Twitter? Who taught him how this works?
where within the video you can see him jumping around like a happy schoolboy who finally got noticed by that one girl that he's always throwing wads of chewed up gum at, and he just truly looked happy, dropping bars, true bars that really destroyed Mac, calling him old,
He just old and bitter.
a drug addict,
Oxycontin you put up your nostril finally rot your brain or where you always wet.
old,
Leave me alone, you old man.
a drug addict,
I don't want you back on the dope.
old,
Old age, stroke face,
and a drug addict.
a relapse going back to his old way.
I mean, yeah, the whole song was basically just that, but the flow was pretty good, the video was flashy, and a lot of people seemed to like it, so Mac had no choice but to respond with his song, Single White Female.
Single white female. Her name is Tammy, but you'll need some fine details.
Which overall, even though it's a more boring song, doesn't have that catchy of a hook, and doesn't have a super flashy video, seems to be a more thorough reconstruction and deconstruction of Tom Macdonald's whole fake persona. He talks about Nova Rockefeller and how her whole anti-label establishment really doesn't make that much sense because she used to be in the industry.
Your girlfriend ghost writes half your raps. Your girl's a juggalette. You're the rap equivalent of Candace Owens. I heard you block people on Twitter because they told you Mac Lethal is bigger, sweet.
And overall, he just seemed to do a good job. But Mac is old and stinky and Tom is cool and bass, so when he dropped his second diss track, Mac Lethal Sucks 2, he definitely took the win.
Hi Dave, hi Dave, hi Dave, I'm not even trying.
And more bars about how Mac was old.
It's so cute when you rap, it's like I'm watching my dad.
His wife sucked.
It's the type to wife up the first fuck them.
His daughter was not going to grow up in a good neighborhood.
Forward your career, got your own pool, kids in private school, you the mother of the year.
He was washed up.
All of the comments from fans you had, I saw it, you lost
He
them.
went on the Ellen Show.
Big bad Dave got the Ellen cosign. Cool.
And are you surprised? Xanax, Xanax, Xanax.
Was a wrestler, I wore spandex. You were a customer, you did Xanax.
Which makes no sense that Tom would make fun of somebody else for being an ex-drug addict, because he himself is an ex-drug addict who makes a bunch of songs about how he used to be depressed and he wants to go back to Xanax and he wants to drink again.
Now you're having thoughts of doing shots, Tom. You're an alcoholic.
And like, I'm not saying that makes him hypocritical, but kind of. Overall, to me, this is just kind of the anti-MGK versus Eminem, because MGK came out with a flashy video, some pretty catchy hooks, and overall just made a pretty good song, but the disses overall were pretty weak. Where Eminem came out with a more scathing song that was pretty low key and overall was able to take MGK out of the rap game. Where the opposite happened here, where Tom had the more flashy video, had a better, more catchy song, and Mac had the more low key song with the harder disses, but people didn't care because, yeah, Mac is irrelevant at this point. Overall, in both situations, it actually doesn't matter what the diss tracks sounded like because people already made up their mind before either one of them even dropped. And after that, a clear winner was found because Mac ended up deleting his diss track and Tom went on to continue doing the same grift. And for the next couple years, he wasn't really getting into the mainstream, outraging people all over the internet, but he kept his fan base pretty happy. He went on to drop tracks like If I Was Black, Buttholes, Cloned Rappers, Fake Fans. He went on to collab with Madchild, dropped a couple more albums, got on tracks with Dax, another popular YouTube rapper. He made a fan dedicated song called My Fans with a music video that's kind of horrifying to think about, and for the next little bit, he just wasn't making waves until COVID-19. Because after that initial boom in 2016 with the Trump election, the political side of YouTube started to kind of fade away and things were kind of boiling down until 2020 when a whole new political scare would come to the forefront. And at first, Tom didn't really know how to react. He ended up dropping a song called Coronavirus, which overall he just doesn't seem very based in because he was actually talking about being scared of the virus.
It's not the sickness is scary, it's all the people who whiling, the government lying, they trying to keep us calm through the sirens, you know it's for real.
And not Sigma. But with the whole new group of terminally online boomers who were now trapped in their house, he couldn't pass up on the chance to start dropping some more political heat. So he decided to drop his track People So Stupid, a comprehensive takedown on the broken American system, talking about abortion, having some hard-hitting bars about bringing Uzis into school but not being able to bring doobies on a plane.
Soon can get a doobie on a plane, but there's Uzis in our schools.
After that, he dropped a track called No Lives Matter in reaction to the whole George Floyd murder.
Screaming from the rooftops, beat down better.
Ended up dropping another track called Best Rapper Ever, which was a track about how he was sad and wanted some Xanax, but he couldn't have any because people would make fun of him online.
It does, I'm anxious. Nothing calms me down like Xanax does, but I can't even relapse because the internet will laugh at us.
And overall, this, which he would eventually get when he dropped his track Fake Woke.
They so fake woke.
Which became very popular at the whole Freedom Convoy in Canada during that time in Toronto. People were marching through the streets and listening to that song, and that is without a doubt the most embarrassing moment in Canadian history, bar none. Despite that, the track ended up hitting number 98 on the Billboard Hot 100, and Tom had finally won. He made it. But with that drop of blood touching his lips, he wanted more. Now he wanted a number 1 on the Billboard. But how would he do it? For the next couple years, he kept dropping songs, trying to get people revved up, but it just wasn't working. How was he ever going to get number 1? Well, there was a way, because there was a new show online called The Daily Wire with a very charismatic man named Ben Shapiro. And in a masterful move that I can only speculate was inspired by his hero Tekashi 6ix9ine, when he went back and forth with the Billboard Hot 100 and managed to get himself a number 1 with his track Trolls by basically cheating the system, Tom did the same thing. He managed to get old Benny Chapman on his track Facts.
Let's look at the stats. I've got the facts. My money like Lizzo, my pockets are fat.
Dropping the video very recently in January of 2024, and at the time of recording this, we don't know if it went number 1 yet. It has managed to beat almost every other track on the iTunes charts, but it does have some pretty steep competition going against Ice Spice's Fart Song, and yeah, that's the state of music in 2024. Do you see why I cover the underground now? But anyways, with the overall lack of releases in January and with all his fans on his side buying his tracks on iTunes, not to mention the entire mainstream media absolutely going nuts over this shit, I think Tom can do it. There's one problem. We're going to have to see if the Billboard is going to allow it. If the Billboard is actually going to let Tom Macdonald and Ben Shapiro go number 1. And overall, I think they should. I think this shit's pretty funny. Because overall, guys, Tom Macdonald is a character, and sure, he's a grifter, sure, he doesn't believe the shit he says, but overall, just like Ethan Klein or any OnlyFans girl online, it's not the grifter's fault for grifting, it's the people who fall for the grift. I mean, come on, if you see opportunity and money, you're not gonna go for that? I mean, I know people got morals and shit, but we're talking about the internet here. Overall, guys, I have to say I kind of respect the man. I mean, he found something that worked for him. He has a pretty good work ethic. I think he's pretty funny, and even though the character is a little bit corny and the whole political stuff can get a little bit crazy, it just makes the rap game more entertaining. So if you made it to the end of this video and you're a Tom Macdonald fan, I appreciate you for sticking it out, because if you didn't stick it out, that clearly means I hurt your feelings, and facts just don't care about your feelings, so get wrecked, boy. But yeah, that's Timmy Macdonald, Tom Macdonald, the king, the 6ix9ine conservative man himself. That's his story. I hope you guys enjoyed. Thanks for watching. Shout out Knife Gang. Leave a knife emoji in the comments below, and an American flag or any flag from any country you're from, and we'll talk to you next time.